All right. Well, Charlotte Tweed is in the house, joining me on This is 50 Freedom Through Passions. Welcome, Charlotte. Welcome to This is 50.
Thank you, Lynette. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Listen, so you and I met through a mutual friend based out of Vancouver, and I really didn't know. She just said, "Oh, she's an expat and she's starting this business." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. Midlife women starting businesses. That's what I do. I interview these women." So when you and I got on a pre-call and you told me what you were doing, I had never even heard of it before. And I just thought, "Oh my God, let's start exploring." Without any further ado, give yourself a backstory, give the audience a little bit of your backstory, and tell us, what are you up to? What have you started?
Well, sure. Well, I live in Ajijic, Mexico, which is south of Guadalajara. And we've been in this location, my husband and I, for about 2.5 years. We really enjoy it here. Vibrant expat community, welcoming, perfect climate. For me, climate was one of the number one reasons to leave Canada, because no more winters for this prairie girl. Can't
Yeah,
handle it anymore.
exactly.
So National Geographic has actually said that this area of Mexico has the second best climate in the world. And I would
Wow.
have to agree, based on my experience in different countries I've been to, it's fabulous. It's very temperate. So April and May are the hottest months, but during the rest of the time, it's like 25, 27 degrees Celsius during the day, sunshine all the time. It's not windy. And then in the evening, it might get down to about 18 Celsius, so it cools off a bit. Even rainy season's pleasant. It'll rain in the morning or rain at night, and it clears off and it's sunny all day. So it's fabulous, a great place to live. And
Exactly.
yes, and we left Canada, a little bit more of a background on me, in June
Sure.
2021, June 15th, to find where we wanted to live. And at that time, I had gotten a new job as a managing editor for an expat magazine. So through that, I made a lot of connections in the offshore world with real estate developers, international lawyers, bankers, precious metal dealers, all kinds of people that used to write for the magazine, and I made really good connections with. And there was an organization called the Free Cities Foundation that would write for us once in a while as well. And I was introduced to their CFO and got to know him quite well. And their platform is I was totally intrigued the first time I heard about it. I went on their website and I spent the entire day on it. It's a parallel lifestyle way of living, an alternative way to governance from what we have now. So what they do is they will go into countries that are open to the idea, negotiate with the governments, and then they set up free cities or autonomous zones in these countries. So they build their own city that's self-governing. So it's super interesting. They'll have their own tax structures, everything. And
Wow.
the people that move to these places are given a contract to read. So there's a contract between the person that moves there and the what you would consider a mayor would make sense to people. So you have that contract. It's not a constitution. It's not something, you have a specific contract with them. So they really vie for people that are of the same mindset, that are looking for that free type of living. Like I said, not free as in it's free to live, but a freedom
Yeah.
lifestyle. So you can go and live the life that you want. They're very business friendly, very entrepreneurial friendly. And I was absolutely fascinated about it. So while I was working as a managing editor for the magazine, we would get people contact us and go, I'm not happy with the political climate in my country. Where can I go to live? Where can I go to live? And I just felt, as a writer and editor, just writing wasn't enough anymore. I felt I had to do a little bit more and help these people find these specific communities. So I quit my managing editor job and started Liberty Travel Coach to introduce people and educate people on these places around the world, because a lot of them are in Europe. There's some in Central America, and people have no idea that they exist. They have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. And so I get this email from my friend, and she says, "Oh, I'm heading to Italy off season because I want to go look at this communal living out there. And it's really popular in Europe." And I wrote back and I said, "Oh my God, I am actually going to be interviewing this woman, Charlotte Tweed, on my podcast.
Mhm.
What questions do you have?" I want to talk more about the communal living and everything, but I guess she had these questions, and I think they're good questions to start with, and then we can dig a little bit deeper. But
Sure.
one of her questions was, "Is communal living gaining traction?" And I'm going to just expand on that and say, like, how do we know? So, how many of these kind of communities exist? Like you said, they were probably a little bit more popular in Europe. Why are
Mhm.
they more popular in Europe than they are here?
That's a good question. I think part of that is we'll use Italy as an example. Like Italy, Spain, I know this is what's going on in those countries, is there's a lot of abandoned towns, right? Because Italy has a very aging population. A lot of the young people that are left are moving to the big cities. They move to Milan, they move to Rome because there is nothing in the country. Same thing with Spain. They move to Madrid, right? It's a life that's gone by. So you have these old medieval towns that are being abandoned, and people will go in, and this is probably what she's looking at in Italy. They will revive. You can go buy the whole town, right, and revive it
Wow.
and rebuild it. Now, they're not necessarily all with a Free Cities Foundation, and they don't have to be. That's just who I'm really familiar with. But there are people that do it. Like the Free Cities has one in Spain that is being rebuilt, and there's a family there right now with kids, and they're working on rebuilding this town. And it's interesting to watch. But I do think it's on the rise because, for one, the remote worker, the digital nomad, that's all on the rise. Because of what with COVID in 2021, and people, you learned that you could work from home, and most people were actually more productive from home. So, if you want that lifestyle, and I think too, we'll add in this food, right? People they're getting back kind of to their old roots. I want to grow my own food. So you can do that in these little communities. A lot of them are old farming communities, or so you can plant your garden, you can be self-sustaining is a big part of it. That people want to go, and they don't want to rely on other people to survive. They don't want to rely on the government to take care of them. They can survive themselves.
Yeah, it's really interesting. For me, it's like, well, what is the event that causes somebody to want to move into these types of situations? And you had described, maybe, there are maybe possibly 6 or 7 reasons that you've heard so far through your
Mm-hmm.
clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just could be, a few things. So give us a little example of, like, what could the event or the catalyst be for, reaching out and doing something like that.
Well, and that's something I cover in my coaching programs too. In the first step is finding out really, why do you want to leave? What is your reason? And I do hear from reasons. One, the political. You want to maintain your autonomy. You want your freedom to have property. You want to live your life. You don't want the government telling you how to live. That's one. For people, affordability. Canada and the United States have become very expensive with the inflation that's happening. And if you can get into a self-sustainable community where you don't have to pay ridiculous amounts for food, like there's one community I know of in Norway. So they're self-sustaining. They have all their agriculture, everything, because Norway isn't cheap either. But everything they have, they sell at a greater reduced price because it's not being shipped in. So they have their stores where they can sell
Right.
their food, they can sell their products, they can sell, if there's a brewery set up. So it's more affordable living. Uh, Climate is a big one for people too. I know that may not be a commune type of issue, but that's a pain point. That was one of my pain points. I'm leaving
Yeah,
Canada. No more winters for me. I'm done.
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, people want to do that and maintain their sovereignty, to
Hmm.
be able
Hmm.
to live their life the way that they want to live it.
And I think you're right on that. I also think too that this idea of like possibly moving to Portugal or Italy or whatever, not like notwithstanding like the communal side of things, just thinking, well, where am I going to retire? Not everybody wants to retire to Phoenix or other places, they want to go to a European country. And I actually did hear a lot about the older population in Europe, not, and then leaving these sort of abandoned cities and things like that, which I think gives this opportunity. If we had to take one communal space, one of these sort of free cities, let's talk about one of the places that the Free City Foundation has put together. What would be the one that sort of stands out as a best practice for you?
For me, one that I am very attracted to, maybe even a possibility for myself, because
Mhm.
political things are changing in Mexico as well, and politics is a big thing
Exactly.
for me. I won't, we won't get into a big political debate, but you have to
Yeah.
be aware of these things going around. And Montenegro is a very interesting country to me. And Montelibero is the name of the commune, the
Hmm.
autonomous zone that is being set up in Montenegro. So they have buildings there right now. They have people living there. It's out just outside of a main city called Bar. So they have access
Hmm.
to the water. What really attracts me about Montenegro, though, is the ease of getting residency, because residency is a big thing. I mean, if you go to a country and find out you absolutely love it, if you can't live there, that might be a problem, right?
Hmm.
So
Obviously, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so their ease of residency is very attractive to me. You can go and set up a business. So I could go and register my travel coaching business there if I want, and essentially spend possibly 6 months out of the year there and get residency. It's very, very easy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
right now they're not a member of the EU, and there's debates on this too. Is it good or is it bad? Um, the good thing about them not being a member of the EU is there's less regulation. It's more affordable living. But the thing that they have applied to be a member of the EU. Now, nobody knows how long. I mean, it could take 15 years. It could never
Yeah,
happen. The EU could fall apart. But if they do happen to become a member of the EU and you get residency there before the fact, that's going to open up your lifestyle to the rest of Europe to possibly
yeah,
settle anywhere. And yeah,
exactly.
the requirements to maintain the residency, if you do it under the business permit, is it's quite easy. So that's
And I
attractive for
think
me.
right. And even like trying to get your residency even in Mexico, I do know the process is like you just really have to show a certain level of income or assets, and you can start the process of residency. Going back to these sort of the Free City Foundation and how they come in and they can set up some, I guess, I don't know what the word is. Is it policies or like I just think about like self-governing communities. I mean, does that work? I just think about it. I just think like how we're so used to like our typical lifestyle of, we've got a premier, we've got a prime minister, we've got, this is from Canada perspective. They've got rules, they've got policies, they've got like what happens in these communities if there was a conflict, like what could happen in there?
Well, what they do then is they generally bring in an arbitrator. So if
Okay.
there is a conflict between people, and I think the beautiful thing about it is generally you're not, if you don't agree with the policies to begin with, you're not going to move there, because it's like, no,
Right.
I don't want to do this. So generally the people are all very like-minded to begin with. So I think, and you're going to have conflict anywhere. I mean, people are people,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But because you are like-minded, I think you're with an arbitrator in place to help you just sort things out. You are going to come to an agreement much quicker because you are of the same mindset.
Right, right. So would you say then, back to the question, is it gaining traction? I think your answer is yes, but
Mm-hmm.
how much traction? Like, is it, and I guess even like when I think about her name's Catherine, and she'll be happy that I'm asking you these questions, is like her next question was, how open are people to communal living? like when you're talking to somebody, or they're asking you questions, when you, particularly when you were writing for the magazine and they were asking questions, what was what was their curiosity? What was the biggest question that they were asking you?
The biggest question I would get, I know some people, this would be a political, but they want to get away from the New World Order. That's exactly
Yeah.
what they ask me. I don't want to be
Hmm.
part of where this world is going. I want to have nothing to do with it. So where can I go? And these are places that people can go, where they are self-governed. I know it's really hard for us to wrap our minds around it, but
Yeah.
think of Hong Kong, think of
Yeah.
Dubai, think of, it's not a brand new concept.
Right.
There are autonomous zones, like there's 266 autonomous zones in the world. So if you look, you mentioned Portugal. So let's look at Portugal. There's Madeira. Madeira is an autonomous zone of Portugal. They are under Portugal's main governance. However, they are self-governed. Same thing with Azores. Azores is the same. I'll say Azores. That's how everybody in North America
Yeah.
says it, Azores. But on the Azores, it sounds much prettier. They're the same. They're part of Portugal, but they're autonomous islands as well. So, yeah, and I spent 3 months on the Azores, and they're self-sustaining. I mean, it's an archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You feel like you're on a completely different planet. So if, I mean, there's somewhere you want to go and you want to be just left alone,
Mhm.
consider the Azores.
And I think this is where your business comes into play. You almost play matchmaker to the
Mhm.
communities, if you will, right? So, to my concern about, like, well, what happens if, there's chaos amongst the community? But typically, like what you're saying is, you would sort of match me to a community that has similar values in the way I'm thinking. So, yeah, I really like that. Um, Okay, so the next question is, what's the profile of the person who's looking for this as a living solution? And I think you kind of covered quite a bit of that already. There's lots are politically driven. I mean, I think about what's happening with the U.S. election right now, and the vein of what's driving that election is very much getting America back to where it was. I don't know, but it's I think that's probably the key one. But are there other types of profiles that you would put in place for somebody who is your client, let's say?
People with a libertarian mindset. And I know if you're Canadian, you may not know what libertarian is. Because honestly,
Exactly. So let's talk about what that is.
never heard the term before I started writing for and editing for my magazine, because it was a libertarian slanted magazine. So generally, in a nutshell, what libertarians believe is uh, small government. They're essentially there. You can live your life the way you want it as long as you're not hurting somebody else. Now, that's not to say there's not going to be rules, but the rules have to make sense and they have to allow you your freedom. Like I said, the sovereignty, the property rights, that type of thing. So they're very independent people. Now, Americans would be more familiar with libertarians because they do have a libertarian party. Like if you've heard of Dr. Ron Paul,
Yeah.
he,
Hmm.
he's Rand Paul's father. He was the head of the Libertarian Party and ran for president at one time. So it's a
Hmm.
lot of very freedom thinking. If the rules don't make sense, why are we following them?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. 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 That's good. That's good. And are there any geographic locations where it's more readily adopted? And I think we did talk a little bit about your the being Europe being it, but let's talk a little bit more. I just wanted to unpack a little bit more about these 6,200 autonomous zones. So, what is the definition of that?
Of an autonomous zone. So that would be you're self-governed. So like with the Azores being an autonomous zone, they have their own laws. They have their own set of rules. They may be under Portugal, but they have their own governance system. So autonomy, right? They have separate.
But what happens if, like, so they just get to create the rules? Like, I'm going to go extreme here. So, you can own a gun, you can hurt somebody. Like,
Can't
like,
hurt
are
people.
there, right. So are there laws like that are put in place that are very similar to the laws that we have in those non-autonomous zones?
Generally, yes. And something I guess I left out too, libertarians are very strong in the belief they do not support war or
Hmm.
fighting. They're very much against that. So it's
Hmm.
more, talking things out. Now, on the other hand, too, a lot of them are gun owners as well. Like Montenegro, I
Hmm.
believe, is the highest um, gun owning per person population in Europe, but they're peaceful.
Right. Right.
So
And what do you think keeps the peace?
that's a good question. It's mindset and not trying to force your ideas on somebody else, right? Because when you try and force somebody to believe what you believe, it doesn't work, right? If someone comes in and tries to force and convince me, not even just convince me, but force me, I'm right, you're wrong, you have to do what I tell you, you have to live the way I'm telling you to live, that doesn't usually end up very well.
Right. No, exactly. When you talk about living in that community and, growing your own food and things like that, I mean, let's not even talk about food at this, like, I mean, I say that, I just think even for myself, like, just the way that the food is being grown and things like that, I can't even think about half the time of what I'm eating. And I try to source where my food is from. And the idea of having a little plot of land that I'm growing my own stuff does appeal, including chickens and animals and everything. I think I told my parents that the other day, and they're just like, "Oh my god, this girl's going crazy." But it's true. Like, we don't really
It's
know
real.
what's in our food.
Mhm.
Exactly, and people are, like. I just think about my kids as an example, and the eczema that's happening. Like, they just their allergies, as we call it. Well, okay, they're not even seasonal anymore.
Mhm.
And I think about just like the obesity and that's happening in this world. It's crazy. It's
Mhm.
crazy. And so that part of the communal living appeals to me. What else is happening inside of these communities?
Well, I'll tell you about another company, and they're called Freedom Towns, and they're looking at building a community in Portugal. So they're just starting as well. So their vision, I think their vision is incredible. I could see myself living in a Freedom Town someday. The population would be around 500 people, and very agricultural focused. They would have their own schools, they'd have their own churches, they'd have their own shops, they build a town from scratch.
Mhm.
And their model is not to build too far out in the middle of nowhere. They're fairly close to a major center because people still, part of the autonomy is being able to move where you want to move as well, and travel freely. And a lot of that is access to international airports, transportation, that type of thing. So their concept is very interesting to me. So I follow them very closely. I'm excited. I can't say where their town is going to be because they haven't signed the final deal, but they're in negotiations with the town and with the politicians there to set up this little freedom town that they want to put together. So I'm really excited to see that come.
And this would be their first one that
That was
they're
their
doing?
first one. Yeah,
Their very first one.
they're very close in the Free Cities Foundation network as well, but they're a separate entity, a little bit
Okay.
of a different vision. So there's
Okay.
more than one model out there, but the general
Yeah.
idea is to live in a free society with like-minded people who are going to respect your actions, respect your thoughts, and let you live the life that you want to live in a sustainable community.
Exactly.
Mm.
So let's talk a little bit about libertytravelcoach.com. That's your business that you have launched.
Mhm.
You're just sort of getting yourself off the ground with it. You've had a couple of clients go through the program. You're sort of working, fleshing out what the program is all about. But
Mhm.
take me through your customer journey. I find you through this podcast and I reach out to you and say, "Hey, Charlotte, I want to learn more." What's the sort of customer journey that you're going to take me through? What are the stages you're going to take me through, Charlotte?
Well, I do have a free 30-minute discovery call. So we have that first, and that's free to, get to know each other a little bit better, see what you're looking for, if we're a good fit, if what I offer is what you're looking for. And then I really have, it's like a 3-step program. So there's 3 main steps. So the first step is the discovery phase. So discovery and the matchmaking. So I educate the person on these destinations. I learn about what they are looking for. What is their catalyst for wanting to move? What is the type of lifestyle they're looking for? And help them delve into that a little bit more as well. And it's something else that I do in there is I do personality tests, and they're really quite revealing and interesting. So we have one, I have one client I'll use as an example. They're very high in aesthetics. So they need to be in a place, he's an architect, and they need to be in a place where he's got the architecture, he's inspired, she's a musician. For them, living in one of these little towns in Italy or Spain, it wouldn't work. They have that mindset, but that's not going to be the right place for them. So I have to look at them more in a country aspect. What country do you want to go to? Because even though they have that, they're very strong libertarians, they're not going to be happy in a little town of 500 people. They need that culture, that inspiration. So we do that. And I learn your travel style through these personality tests. I learn your decision-making style, how you make decisions. If you're a couple, there's an interesting one you can do together as a couple, which is very interesting. A lot of times couples have very different, travel
Oh,
styles.
yeah. They
I'm an
may think.
introvert, she's an extrovert. It's okay, how do you make this work? So that's part, and the beginning is just a lot of learning and getting to know yourself, setting intentions for going to see these countries. Because if you have to go see a country before you move there. I've heard of people move to a place sight unseen, a country, and it's a recipe for failure because it is not what they expect when they get here. You have to visit first. So that the 3 steps are really that's the travel part. Okay, these are the countries. You know what? These would be great for you. Then they decide, yes, this sounds great. This community sounds great, or this country sounds great. I want to go. So then we set intentions for what they want to learn while they're on that trip. What is it you want to know when you're there? Is this going to be aesthetically pleasing for you? Are you going to get the culture you want? Are you going to get the political climate you want, the community you want? Community is very important. And, just kind of coach them through their visitation and connect them with people that I know in destination to help show them around, maybe make suggestions on little trips or, events they could go to get a better feel for the country. And then the 3rd step is when they come back home, what have you learned on that trip? How can you apply the transformation that you went through on that journey to now that you're back home, and start preparing yourself, if that is where you want to move, to prepare for that move? Because there's a lot to do to prepare to get ready to go. Mentally, physically, you have to, your family, there's a lot to work through in that process. And well, you know what, if it wasn't the country, then maybe we got to start all over again, because you really do not know until you go and experience it yourself.
I agree. And I think so. So your idea is like to do enough of this analysis up front that you should be able to like match them accordingly to maybe the country, and then maybe possibly a couple of communities that they can go and take a closer look at, or it would be a good spot for them to go if there isn't a community there yet, and it probably could be starting. Like I know in Portugal, I just think about they used to have the sort of the golden ticket. You buy a certain amount of property, you got the golden ticket right away, you got your residency. But I believe that out of the main centers, they've stopped that. But on the outskirts, more of the farming communities or the communities outside of the major centers, I think that offers still is there. Um, yeah,
And
it's
residency
really
is ever changing. It changes a lot. So
exactly, and I know, and like even just I don't know so much anymore, but I do know that the last past three years, even the digital nomad scene was crazy because everybody was working remote, and I believe now that people are being called back to the office, and so that sort of limited time frame of living in a particular country. I think they gave you sort of a good tax break if you live there as a digital nomad. But now to get the sort of residency, I think is more sort of leaning towards the expats. And I think about this a lot as an expat in midlife is a different situation than an expat in the younger years. And maybe that's a question for you because I think as you get older, it's harder to build a community. So you may be looking to leave your country. You're going to go and live. Just my reason would be for weather, and so I'm going to move to Mexico. But where am I going? Like, where am I going in Mexico? Because I mean, there's certain areas you could go to, but the expat community really doesn't match
mhm,
my lifestyle. So I
exactly.
think that is probably one of the biggest ones is how do you find a community in later stage in life? Because it's hard, and especially if you're not a total extrovert, it's hard to kind of get out there and put yourself out there and find that community. Would you
Mhm.
say your client base is probably in midlife, is kind of like at the closer to retirement, or tell
Yeah,
us a little bit about.
it demographics, have changed so much because of the digital nomad, that type of thing. I'd say my demographic more is, yes, 40 over, 50 over, pre-retirement type of thing, because people have realized, well, we don't really have to do that 9 to 5 work anymore. Things have changed. And, you speak of community. And that was one of the things I really, I'd pray for. Take me to a community, please. I love like-minded
Yeah,
people. And so we went to quite a few different places in different countries. And then when we ended up here, now this is a misconception people have is, I will hear to, I don't want to move to where there's a bunch of expats. I don't want to move to where there's a bunch of expats, but there's something you need to consider. And I used to think the same way until I stayed outside of Mexico City in a little country house near Tenancingo. So it was in between Tenancingo and Malinalco, it's called. And we were the only gringos around. And at that time, we didn't speak any English, or sorry, any Spanish.
yeah,
What made me say that is I was thinking ahead of myself. We went to the gas station, just a cute little story. And I say, sorry, but my computer, I learned how to say, can you speak English? So I asked the gas attendant, I pulled up and I said, ¿Hablas español? And she looked at me and went, sí. And my husband laughed at me because usually it's him doing things like that, not me. And they, no,
she
no, no,
knew
no.
too.
It was so funny. But we loved it there. It was wonderful to be there. It was great to be out in the country. It was wonderful to experience that different area, the culture, because it's a place very few expats or Canadians or Americans go. We were there for 2 months, but it never would have felt like home. We never really would have fit or assimilated in because there was nobody there like us, nobody that knew our
Right.
culture of being Canadian. So I had read about Ajijic and heard about it, and Ajijic actually has the highest concentration of American expats on the planet. And I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. The climate sounds amazing. It's smaller town because I'm a small town girl. I love visiting city, but I'm not living there. And I thought, let's go check it out. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And we got here, and within 3 days, both my husband and I were like, yeah, this is where we're going to stay for a while, because we went
Wow.
to a restaurant our first night here and we could understand people. It's like they're
Yeah.
speaking English, and we felt like we
Yeah.
were eavesdropping. But because English is so widely spoken here, you can get by without learning Spanish. Now, I do recommend people learn the language of the country they're going to the best they can. You may never become fluent, but I think it's respectful to the people and,
Exactly.
respectful to their culture. And it's a better way for you to connect with the locals. If you can at least, get by at the markets, get by at the restaurants, it's okay. But where I am, you can start here with very little or no Spanish. But,
Exactly.
with that, because there were so many people, I mean, we found a church to go to. The pastors are both Canadian, and we have a nice little
Wow.
mix of Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans that come to church. So, we found that. We play pickleball, and, you can be as active in the community or not. Because there are so many expats here, I mean, there's painting clubs, there's drawing clubs, there's writing clubs, there's hiking clubs, there's cycling club. You can do all kinds of stuff, so it's a very livable area.
Yeah. And so, just for the benefit of the listeners, spell Ajijic.
Spell
I'm
it.
saying, yeah.
Ajijic.
And now, when I was in San Miguel Allende, which is, I think, about a 2 hour plane ride from where you are, possibly an hour. I think I think you'd have to take the bus.
Yeah.
But when I was in San Miguel Allende, I had met these two ladies sitting at this restaurant. I was because I was traveling by myself, and so I was sitting at the bar, and these two ladies walk in, and they knew this place. They were coming for their nightcap and their dessert, their cheesecake, and they were in their 70s, and I asked where they from. Well, it turns out they're neighbors of mine in Toronto. Like literally, they lived across the street from me. It's such a small world. And
Yes.
they told me about Ajijic because they said San Miguel's getting too expensive, and you should go here because there's a big concentration of expats. And I said the same thing that you said is I didn't really want to live in a real expat area
Hmm.
because I wanted to be immersed in the culture of Mexico and things like that. But I get now what you're saying. Like, why do you suppose people first say, I don't want to be where there's a bunch of expats?
I think because a lot of expats get a bad rap. There are some out there that aren't that very nice. And it's kind
Hmm.
of like the news. You always hear the bad stories. So you hear the stories of the expats who treat locals poorly. Expats drive up the prices of real estate, which is true.
True.
They
Hmm.
do drive up the price, and then locals get priced out of the market. So, that's a true negative, that one.
Yeah.
And, from where we've been here now, we've only had one negative expat run in, and that was actually with neighbors in our condo complex. It was very strange.
Wow.
Anyway, the expats here I find are very respectful and assimilate well into the community. And I know I've heard too, oh, there's more expats there than there are Mexicans. I don't think that is true. I mean, when you we'll go to events that they have in the square or different festivals. Like Holy Week is huge in Mexico. So they do, all week, they do all kinds of festivals. And there's not a lot of expats there. It's mostly Mexicans that are there. So I find a lot of the festivals they're still very culturally
Yeah.
Mexican. So
Yeah.
you do get a good mix of that.
Exactly. And those festivals are amazing,
Hmm.
amazing. The Day of the Dead for sure is one big one that's
Yes.
happens beginning of November. So, okay, so where do people find you, Charlotte? If they were listening to this podcast and they want to find out more, where would they reach out to you?
Well, libertytravelcoach.com is my website. And I have a weekly newsletter that I send out as well. So you can sign up for that. And that's on the
Okay.
website. I'm social media, I'm mostly on Instagram. The handle is Liberty Travel Coach. And Telegram, I have a Telegram channel, which is also Liberty Travel Coach, and a YouTube channel, Liberty Travel Coach.
Okay.
So if you can remember Liberty Travel Coach, you should be able to find me.
There's a good Google search will get you there. Well, I'll link a few of those links to the in the show notes. But Charlotte, I want to thank you for joining me today. It was really interesting and super insightful. I really didn't have a clue, and you really opened my eyes and ears, I think, to exploring a little bit more for myself as well. So
Hmm.
thank you so much. And I wish you all the best of luck in getting this business off the ground.
Thank you, Lynette. It's been my pleasure.